Hey there, skate fans. It's been a while. I'm sure you missed us, but Mitch Whitmore and I, Victor Halthorpe, we're back with the latest edition of the GSN News Show.
Yep, we've got some good stuff to cover. We have the short track World Cup that just finished. We still need to talk about the long track World Cup, and there's some other happenings going on in the speed skating world. Okay, so to cover the short track World Cup, we had some interesting things that happened. Some of the same names have been winning, but in the mixed gender relay, something really interesting happened. So in years past, if a team gets disqualified in the A final, the winner of the B final would move up and take their place.
Which is what happened in 2018 at the Olympics.
It happened. The Dutch women won the B final, and they moved up and won a bronze medal.
Also, yeah.
Unbelievable. How do you feel about how that system works?
I do think it's better if the finalists is almost separate event. Like whoever gets first, second, third, or in this case DQ'd, should get third. I think it motivates people to take a little more, like take more chances, not play it as safe once you make it to the final, knowing that, you know, make it or break it will still not ruin the entire race for you.
You don't drop past the people that made it to the final. I completely agree. And now it seems like the ISU has changed their tune and are going with that method. So two teams got disqualified in the A final, and instead of the B final winner moving past them, they actually just share the bronze medal in the A final, which again, I really like. Yeah. If you didn't make it to the final, then you're out, you know? I think they should do it for ranking. Yeah. But you weren't actually in the race, so how can you win a medal in that race?
Somebody you beat head to head in the semifinal,
right?
And then later on,
just because they get DQ'd in a race that you weren't in, you should not move ahead of them. So I think it's a good move. Hopefully, that is the rule that they stick with, and at the next games, that's the same situation.
There was also another unusual result. The two Dutch skaters, Sandra Velzeboer and Selma Poutsma, they tied.
Yes, and Poutsma got out so fast. She was in the third position off the line, and she gapped the field by almost a quarter of a lap. And I think she was just going so fast, stumbling a bit as she went, but made it to the line. And I think it was a potential premature celebration. She kicked out and kind of celebrated at the same time as Velzeboer was coming with a head of steam, and they tied down to the 1,000th.
Maybe they planned it. It's the only way you can get two gold medals to the same country.
Hey, they were pretty excited about that after. It is really cool, but still, if that was
risky move, yes.
Could have been the 1,000th the other way, and you don't want to celebrate too early. And actually, Seo, the Korean, also did the same thing, a slightly premature celebration, and he thought he had won. He was given the double.
Standing off the smooth.
Yep.
Classic Korean.
He's flexing on him, and then he got second.
Yeah.
So that's unfortunate, but we see that time and again in inlines, short track, long track, maybe not long track time trials so much, but in the mass star where people celebrate too early and then they lose.
Yeah.
I don't really understand the mentality, and maybe they need to grow up doing just time trials to know that like always go through the line. But maybe just celebrate right after the line. Just make it that one extra meter.
It costs so much less than the disappointment will hurt your ass.
Yeah, it does look cool coming across the celebration, but you better be sure that they're 100 meters behind you before you do it. So.
Yeah. I think actually, I remember from the first inline world championships I ever really watched, something like this happened where Cuyavante was celebrating the entire straightaway, like 100 meters, and then got beat by a Korean right on the line. And that thing went viral.
I think I actually have seen that race, and Aaron Jackson did the same thing. I don't know if that was at Worlds or Pan Am's. Slight celebration before the line.
Luckily, she got a goal later on.
Yep.
That would have been
tragic.
Yeah.
And actually, Joey Mantilla at one of our trials did a celebration a little early and then kicked towards the line, debatably, but pretty good video evidence to show. But it celebrates, foot's off the ice, and if your foot's off the ice as you go across the line, it's a DQ.
That's a classic Joey win.
But luckily they reinstated him, and he was able to go to World Championships for it.
It's also going to be really exciting seeing the rest of the women return. We're missing out on Ariana Fontana and also Natalia Malashevska. There was finally a decision, and she will be able to race next year. She missed out on 3 whereabouts, so the doping test where you have to be at a certain address at a certain time of the year or a certain time of the day. And she missed out on 3 of those, which means you will be banned. But they decided the total length of the ban will be 14 months. However, starting from when this whole thing happened, So by now, it's already going to be good for next season. She'll be back in the field.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough to let it get to 3 missed tests, but it's good to see that she'll be back. You know, it was not an actual
it's a
doping
big difference.
violation. So, I'm glad to see that she'll be back next season. And, you know, some of the other names, I know Ariana Fontana is still dealing with some issues with their federation. Hopefully that gets cleared up. And then we're still waiting on Kim Botine and Suzanne Schulting.
Big names.
Also missing Minjung Kim from Korea.
Minjung Choi?
I said Kim. Cut that part out.
They're all named Kim.
Minjung Choi, not Minjung.
Choi.
Choi, not Kim. But I also said Minjung from Korea. Minjung Choi. So we've got some big names that are missing, and I feel like the women's level is increasing like we anticipated. So when they come back at the same time, it's going to be a really good competition on short track.
Definitely.
Finally, to the real sport of long track speed skating. Shifting over to the long track, we need to still cover our results from the 4th World Cup of the season.
Yep.
The rink was cold.
It was cold and slow.
And slow, yes. And we did not have Team Jumbo in attendance.
Yeah.
How do you feel about some teams skipping or countries skipping World Cups?
I mean, obviously it's sad. We only have 6 World Cups per year. If you compare that to basically any other sport, it's so few. And I think that's a thing that can make speed skating super cool, that at every of these events, you're going to have the absolute best skaters, not like cycling where they have different race schedules throughout the season. But it's not the case, so I think that was a little sad. I do understand why. Like, they have trials for the upcoming World Championships, so if you prioritize, well, you would probably prioritize World Championships above the World Cups, but for the sport itself, it does suck.
Yeah, and it's tough because the World Cups are so far removed from the World Championships.
Yeah.
And so you would think, and you know, once we get our coaches panel or coaches corner discussion out there, Bart Schouten had some interesting points that, you know, Jaak Ori, the coach of the Jumbo team, should be a good enough coach, and he believes that he is a good enough coach to design his program to still go to all the World Cups, yet still have the most optimal peak for the World Championships. And I tend to agree. I think maybe you can sit out of a race or two, especially if there's multiple 500s, and you're somebody that qualifies in a bunch of distances. Yeah. But just to not attend in general is really tough for viewership and the fans. I know in other sports leagues, they lose the money from not attending some of those games at certain times.
But actually, especially for the Dutch, like you just said, well, if you're qualified for a lot of distances, you can skip some, but that's not really the case. They're so specialized. Most of these people, the Jumbo guys that didn't go, Jorrit Bergsma specialized in the 5K, 10K, Yuta only does the 500,000.
Yep, no 15s this year.
No team sprint, no 1500s. It's not that many races. That's... but yeah, the coaches panel, which we'll post later on, was very exciting. It was basically debating whether this is the ISU's responsibility, the Federation or the International Skating Union, to make it attractive, or if it's the responsibility of the good skaters, good coaches, to make sure that they have skaters there.
And we had a little debate on that point. I thought it was really good. And by the way, the coaches on that panel, all 4 coaches have coached to Olympic gold medals, so they know really good group of coaches to listen to.
If we take Jumbo out of the equation, it was really a World Cup where the favorites did do well.
Yeah, Miho is just in a world of her own right now in that 1500. She won by quite a bit in the 1000 this time, but generally the 1000 has been a lot closer. But man, her 15, she's won, I believe, all of them by a full second or more. So she's so dominant right now. On the men's side in the 1500, we had a wild card,
that's surprising,
which was great. And honestly, I think even all of the U.S. team kind of was like happy for Petter to beat Jordan Stolz in the 15. Obviously, when Jordan is fully prepared, I think he's going to be the best 1500 skater. But it was still a great win for Petter, and he threw down an awesome race.
He did. So super really good. Speaking of awesome races, now Jordan did not win the 1500, but he won the 1000 meter by a larger margin in the men's 1000 than any other man since 1989, won by more than a second.
And I was debating with Jordan right after the race on whether or not that was the biggest win ever in the men's 1000, and he thought that Shawnee had done a bigger one, but we had our trivia question, and actually, Jordan, you're number one since 1989.
That's impressive.
The year I was born. So crazy races there.
But all across the board, the favorites did well. We had Lauren Debray back on top. Patrick Roast after a not so great 10K back in first position.
Yep.
For the 500 meter, it was Kim, Jackson,
Yep, usual suspects in most of the distances, I would say. But the team events, I think didn't look at the amount, but this might have been the most attended team pursuit competition ever. We had multiple new teams on both the men's and women's side, and it was really deep. We had a full A and B group.
9 teams in the men's B group.
Yeah,
that's a lot.
That's big attendance, and the winner of that was the Belgian team.
And second place was France.
Bart Swings. He is not the only guy from Belgium, turns out. And then
he was the only guy leading. But yeah,
he's the only guy leading for sure. Not sure if they did a ton of pushing just yet, but
just staying on him was
it's not an easy task. We've seen that in the mass starts, but really cool to see. I love seeing these other countries taking it more and more serious. Tough when sometimes in the past there was only 6 teams that raced it, but now it's
tough
really becoming something.
And that was just super exciting. I also think it's really cool when these nations that we think of smaller skating nationalities or small skating nations, when they overperform just because they prioritize the team pursuit or because they get to train so much together. Yep. Like we saw back in 2009 before the Vancouver Olympics, the Swedish got second at World Champs. And I would not be surprised if we see, Belgium, France medaling in a few years.
Yeah, it reminds me of the New Zealand squad from the 2018 games too, or leading into that they, by themselves, Shane had already retired and came back only for that. Peter was on the top of his game, and Rian was, TP was his thing. Yeah. That's what they did, and they almost won a gold/silver medal, like a 10th off of beating Korea. So,
does well.
Yeah, really cool to see. And speaking of the French, just to move away from the World Cup for a second, the French had their first nationals, you said?
In more than 30 years.
That's
not on French soil. It was held in Insel together with I think it was Romanian and also the Swiss national championships. But there were so many skaters there. Now, coming from inline skating, I was familiar with basically all of these participants, and there was a lot of them. And I could not count the amount of European champions, world champions that attended that. Now, obviously, I think this was their first time on ice. They did have a training camp in Insel after the competition. So hopefully that's the start of a really cool inline to ice movement there.
Yeah, it seems like whoever is running the Ice Federation, or if it's maybe part of the inlines, they're doing an awesome job. Like they got a team together, they competed at a World Cup in a team pursuit, and they held their own. They got second in the B group, and their time was actually solid for where they're at. And then to have an actual nationals, I think is super cool to see. And talking to some of the other inline guys, they say France is by far the most untapped, besides Colombia, untapped potential from the inline world. And so we'll see what they do over the next quad and beyond.
That could be. This episode's skater highlight is kind of a bittersweet one. Joy Beune from the Netherlands, she finally medaled at a World Cup. She's had 5 fourth places, and this was her time to finally medal in the 3K? 1500.
Yeah, so Joy has been solid for a long time.
Yeah,
she won Junior Worlds when it was in Salt Lake City. I remember watching that.
Against Yuta.
The battle of her and Yuta. And Joy was not just good in the 3K, 1500. She was solid in the 500 and 1000 as well. But I feel like she has, I don't want to say underperformed as a senior, but just, she was better than Yuta as a junior, so it's hard to see that. But yeah, gets on the podium in the 15. She's super consistent. She's always good. But she's had some trouble in the team events.
Definitely. So for the team events, she now for the second time managed to get a DQ, sadly. Last year at the World Championships, the Dutch missed out on a gold medal because her ankles were not completely protected by there was basically skin showing, and that is against the ICU regulations, so they were disqualified. And this time she forgot her transponders, so they finished the race, fastest time across the board, and they got a DQ.
I hate to say the rules are rules, so they know the rules and need to stick to them. Now, should a lack of transponders be a DQ? Totally up for debate. I know at the US Championships, it is not a DQ. Your first one is a warning because it is the third backup system.
Yeah.
First is the photo finish, then you've got the cells. or maybe it's the second backup system, and then the transponders, and then hand timing after that. So it's not a necessary thing per
Could
se.
give your first warning per season.
But if they needed to use that for the times, then maybe you're DQ'd.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's a tough one. The ankle showing is also tough because that's something that you would think the refs would see before the race and cover.
They did change this lately, where it used to be when you enter the ice, they check you and you're either good to go or you're not.
Yeah.
But since the beginning of this season, it's been if there is any skin showing there during the race.
Yeah.
So like if it pulls out, pulls down, if you stretch the knee a little forward, and it's just.
It's really tough, and maybe you got to get better ankle guards that are not going to slide down at all. But yeah, that's a tough situation. Also, we have had it at our trials here in the U.S. Somebody was told that their ankles were showing on the starting line or just before the starting line, but they didn't tell them and DQ'd them anyways.
Oh.
Like, well, maybe the ref could have just said to the skater, "Hey, why don't you fix that real quick before the race starts?" Hope for a little DQ.
Oh, that's painful.
So some things that need to be fixed. But again, we did want to mention just like how good of a skater she's been.
Yeah.
In a tough system because they get bounced around, especially that women's 15 and 3K for the Dutch is incredible. So just making the team year after year
that's for sure.
is a tall task.
Since the end of the fourth World Cup, we've also had some time trial results that are pretty remarkable. We saw Michelle de Jong skating a 300-meter world record and Marijke Groenewoud skate the fastest ever last lap in a 1,000-meter on sea level ice for a woman. 27.8.
27.8, that's a really, really fast
That's a
second lap.
decent first lap.
It's a little silly of a stat to be who has the fastest last lap of something. She could have bagged the first lap, or anybody in history could have done that.
She did do
but she didn't,
1:13.7.
and it was really fast.
So not bad.
But just the stat itself, could be something. Also, same thing in the 300. If the 300 was a more raced event, I think that would be crazy. But the one thing with it is, I believe Heather was in the ballpark.
Yeah,
and she still did a whole 1,500 after that.
I'm also pretty confident we're going to see at least a few girls skate faster than that at the next World Cup here in Salt Lake City in their 15.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised to see some low 24s at that World Cup as well. But yeah, still a good feat. It's
exciting. She's never skated the 1,000-meter at a World Cup before. So having one of the fastest in the whole world this season is pretty interesting. I hope she manages to qualify in their trials so she gets to do this in Salt Lake.
Yeah. With the 113 in Heerenveen, I would not be surprised if she does.
Some transfer news. Mid-season transfer news is that Ivani Blandin has signed a cycling team contract for next summer.
A true pro cycling contract.
Pretty cool.
We covered her a lot earlier this season about just her cycling prowess.
We spotted her first. So.
We did. Talent identification right here. But yeah, she's a really good cyclist competing in that. She competed at the short track trials. And now she's a legit cyclist.
Maybe she's just really good at sports. Pretty cool.
She's good at sports. They do a lot of biking on the Canadian distance team, so not surprised.
Yeah. Who was the last man, or the only man ever, to do short track and long track at the same Olympic Games?
I know the answer.
Do you guys?
Okay, that's a good question.
That is a good question.
For our trivia question of the week.
Who was the last man to skate both short track and long track at the same Olympic Games?
That's a good question. There's only been one, correct?
The first and the last.
Yes, probably not going to happen again, but there's only one. I think there's been a couple women that have done it.
Jorien Termors.
Termors for sure. But,
Let us know in the comment section below.
Comment down.
You can win World Cup tickets and nothing else. To answer our last trivia question, forgot.
To answer our trivia question from last episode, which Havard Lorentzen was kind enough to ask, when was the last time that no Dutch men were on the 10,000 meter podium at a World Cup?
It happened in Stavanger, but before then.
But before that,
the right answer that Adrian Ferrar, you got that right, was in 2006 in
Moscow.
Yeah, it's been a while.
It's a long time. The Dutch are obviously pretty good at the 10K.
Yeah, so Adrian Ferrar send us a DM and we're going to give you your ticket for the Salt Lake City World Cup.
You just have to come to Salt Lake City.
Coming up next, we have a bunch of national qualification races here in the US and Netherlands, as well as Canada.
Yep, I think everybody's going to have them coming right up.
The Norwegians.
I think some already did it in Insel, though. We saw the Swiss and among others. But yeah, some really exciting races coming up to watch. Maybe we'll try to live stream the Dutch trials to our channel if possible. And I think that US Speed Skating and Canada will also have their trials live streamed on YouTube. So be sure to check those out. What are you looking forward to most out of those?
I mean, it's always exciting seeing what Dutch skaters makes it, because I'm not going to say it's random, but you can put 10 names in every single distance that have a chance of making it. So those are going to be really exciting, which ones we're going to see not just at the World Cup, but also the World Championships and at European Championships.
Yeah,
it's a big deal.
I think the Dutch trials are the most interesting because they're the most random. Who has trained the best over the past couple months could be a different answer than who had trained the best prior to their first trials.
Yeah.
So
I would say looking at the other countries is more a matter of seeing how good the skaters are in terms of how good they can perform at these races, not who is actually going to win the spot. We do know which skaters will actually make the team, at least the best ones that we will see in the better end of the field later on.
Yep. So should be a fun little next couple weeks, and then January is nuts.
That'll be exciting.
We have the 4 continents here in Salt Lake City. Then the weekend after is World Cup 5. Weekend after that is World Cup 6 in Quebec.
Before all of that, we have the European Championships.
And
it's really just every single weekend there's going to be some action. We're going to cover that, give you predictions, preview shows, post-view shows, all the shows. Yeah.
So good stuff coming up.
Up until then, what we recommend you to do to get even more GSN content is to become, it's called a member?
Become a member. You got to hit join on the channel and join our membership. You get some fun little badges. You get some emojis you can use in the comment section. And then we have multiple tiers beyond that, which give you different perks as well. Once we get a certain amount, I think we need 8 members, we said. Once we get 8 members, we'll make some videos for members only, which you can interact with us even more.
So help us get there, help you get there. Send us a little bit of ka-ching, and then we promise to make some more super cool content for you guys.
And we'll also link some stuff for some swag. So we're working on that. Okay, well, thanks for tuning in, and be sure to comment and subscribe. Anything that you want.
Tell a friend about the channel. Follow us on Instagram, YouTube, you name it. It was fun having you guys. Right? It was fun.